Science, science, science in pajamas, jamas, jamas, woo! Alright, so today we're going to talk about something called sex-linked inheritance or sex-linked traits. Now what these are is these are traits that are, the genes for them are located on the sex chromosomes. Now if you remember, in humans, we have two distinct sex chromosomes, and your combination will determine what sex you are. So for females, we are XX. We call that being homogametic. I had to think about the right term. I was trying to say homozygous. I'm like, no, that's not right. So homogametic, meaning we have two of the same sex chromosomes. And I can say we because I am female. As opposed to males, they have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. So they are heterogametic. They have two different sex chromosomes. Now, the interesting thing about this is they are not the same chromosome, X and Y. So in females during meiosis, we can have crossing over occur between the two X's, but crossing over cannot occur between X and Y. They're not the same chromosomes. They do not have the same genes on them. They are actually not homologous. So that actually is very, very, very important. Now, I like to tell my kids this, and I say, hear me out before you get upset and start thinking I'm judging males. There are no life essential genes on the Y chromosome. I never said it wasn't important, but there are no life essential genes. How do I know this? Because half our population doesn't have a Y chromosome. If there were genes that were essential for life, for an organism to survive, located on the Y chromosome, then half our population would be dead. That doesn't mean it's not important. We still need the Y chromosome because we are a sexually reproductive species. So to have a next generation, we do need the exchange of genetic material, and that's where males and females come in. So it is still important. Now, sex-linked traits, we said, are traits where the genes are located on the sex chromosomes. So they're either located on the X or the Y chromosome. They may have nothing to do with your sex or gender or anything like that. And that's not what we mean by sex-linked. We just mean that it is located on the sex chromosome. And, so sex-linked traits, more often than not, we talk about them in terms of X-linked traits, meaning traits where the genes are located on the X chromosome, just because those are more common and they can affect males and females. For Y-linked traits, because the Y chromosome is so much smaller, there's a lot fewer genes on it, and only males have a Y. They're very, very rare, and they don't affect females at all. So that makes them even more rare to see and notice and all that. Now, some classic examples of sex-linked traits that we like to talk about are hemophilia and red-green colorblindness. So hemophilia is the inability to clot your blood properly. And what that means is in your blood, you are missing a particular coagulation factor. And for most of us, we cut ourselves. Let's say I cut my arm. It'll bleed for a little bit, but then it scabs up and then, it's going to heal itself. Well, what if you can't form that scab? What if you can't close up the wound with coagulation factors and then the blood just keeps coming out and coming out and coming out? And that's what hemophilia is. The blood doesn't want to coagulate. There's actually different types of hemophilia depending on exactly which coagulation factor is affected. But essentially it's the inability to clot your blood, which is very dangerous because, let's say for me, I used to play soccer when I was in high school. And you get kicked, you get a nasty bruise. So you can get a bruise like this size on your thigh. Now, a bruise is essentially minor internal bleeding. Now, with bruises, they hurt for a while. That dark color is just a pooling of blood, but then, it heals up, goes away. what if you don't clot that artery, or not artery, that those capillaries, and it keeps spilling more blood into your body? So someone with severe hemophilia could actually bleed to death without having a cut if they have a really bad bruise, because that's blood pouring out of the capillaries and into the interstitial spaces. Or if they do, maybe they get in a car accident, they have a slice on their head. For us, again, or for most people, it'll bleed for a while because the head always tends to bleed more, but it'll bleed for a while. Eventually it'll stop. You put pressure on it to help with the coagulation and the scabbing over. But if you can't stop the bleeding, then the bleeding will just keep occurring until you bleed to death. So can be very dangerous. Thankfully, technology and medicine has really helped us out with that. Another one is red-green colorblindness, so not able to tell the difference between red and green. Now, I am not red-green colorblind. My understanding is that it shows up as different shades of gray. Both colors do. And so that means that you don't see colors normally, and that could affect things like driving, because red and green, stop and go. But knowing the order of the stoplights, which is where, helps with that. Not life-threatening, really. Just probably an inconvenience. Again, I'm not colorblind. I'm not trying to speak for anyone who is. But just looking at it and comparing it to hemophilia, a nuisance, sure. And does that mean that it's, some take lightly? No, but it's definitely not like hemophilia, where it is potentially life-threatening. All right, so both of those are located on the X chromosome. Now, how we write these is, because we have to differentiate between X and Y chromosomes, we are going to write them as the chromosomes with a superscript. So let's go to hemophilia. It is a recessive sex-linked trait. So a female who is completely non-hemophilic, meaning that they're not even a carrier, it would be X, capital H, X, capital H. If a female is a carrier, then that means she has one normal X with the capital H, and she'll have one X with a recessive H. Now, being a carrier is like what we were talking about with Mendelian genetics and being heterozygous. You have the dominant allele and a recessive allele, but you only show the dominant trait. Same thing here. This woman is not hemophilic. She has normal blood clotting, but she carries this trait and can pass it on to her offspring. And then we can even have a female who's hemophilic. She has to have two recessive X's. Now that's different than guys. Guys are hemizygous, which means that as opposed to homozygous where you have two of the same alleles, or heterozygous where you have two different alleles, because guys only have one X chromosome, they can only have one allele for these traits, and they will only express that one allele. Because remember what I said, X and Y do not have the same genes. So when we're talking about a gene that's located on the X chromosome, there is no effect from the Y. So guys either have the trait or they don't. So you either have a guy with normal blood clotting. Notice I did not put a superscript on the Y because there is no associated gene on the Y for blood clotting. Or you have a guy that is hemophilic. Now, if you notice, it's a little bit different for men or males versus females. And this is why we tend to see sex-linked traits more often in males, because males, they only have one of the alleles. Even if it was a Y chromosome or a Y-linked trait, then it would be on the Y but not the X, and they would still show it. But because of them only having one of each chromosome, that means that whatever the gene is, whatever allele for that gene is on that chromosome is the one that's going to be shown. And that's what it means to be hemizygous. They only have one X, so whatever the alleles on that X are going to be will be seen. as opposed to females who can be homozygous dominant for normal clotting, heterozygous or carriers, meaning that they have normal clotting, but they can pass on the hemophilic allele, or they can be homozygous recessive and be hemophilic. And again, this is why we tend to see these traits at higher probabilities with males versus females, because males either have it or they don't. Females have it, don't have it, but carry it. So I'll show you a couple examples of those with Punnett Squares. We haven't gotten the pedigrees yet. All right. So, let's say right here, we have a man with normal blood clotting. So, X, capital H, Y. And he is married to a woman with she has normal blood clotting, but she's a carrier. So a carrier woman, X, big H, X, little h. Now we're going to do the Punnett squares just like before. We just have to take into account the X and Y chromosomes. So we have X, X. I like to do the X and Y's first. You guys can do it however you want as long as you get it done. X, 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 Y, X, Y. So now let's bring our superscripts. Big H, big H. Big H, little h. Big H, little h. Now we also analyze these a little bit different, because a lot of times we're going to talk about them in terms of males versus females. So I might ask, what is the probability that a daughter will have hemophilia? Well, if we're talking about the probability of a daughter, that means I'm going to ignore these two right here because those show sons. All right, so my daughter has a 0% chance of having hemophilia. A daughter would have a 50% chance of being completely normal or a 50% chance of being a carrier. She would not be hemophilic though. And if I ask a question like, well, what's the probability that the son would be hemophilic? Now we're going to look on this side because we specified son, which means we're going to look at the XY individuals. There's a 50% chance of being hemophilic, 50% chance of being normal. All right. So hopefully that helps. Let's do another one. How about we have we do colorblind this time. So we have a colorblind male and a carrier female. Now I have kids asking me, like, why do I choose not to put the C for colorblind? A lot of it has to boil down to superscripts are naturally smaller. A capital and lowercase c look the same anyways. Putting it in a smaller proportions makes it hard to tell which is dominant, which is recessive. So what I do instead is I pick a letter that I know I can easily tell which one is dominant, which one's recessive. So capital, lowercase, easy to tell. All right, so let's go ahead and do our Punnett square. We have X, 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 Y, X, Y. All right, so big, little, 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 big, little. All right. So in this case, what is the probability that the daughter will have hemophilia? Since we're talking about daughters, we're going to ignore the sons. A 50% chance of having hemophilia, a 50% chance of being a carrier, and no percent chance of being completely normal vision. Sorry, I said hemophilia again, didn't I? Sorry. What is the probability that our daughter will be colorblind? 50% chance she'll be colorblind, 50% chance she'll be a carrier, so that means she'll have normal vision, but can pass on the colorblind gene to her sons. And what is the probability of her having completely normal vision? 0. Because even here, she might not show the colorblind, but we still consider carriers as separate groups. And then what's the probability that their son will once again be colorblind? 50% and 50% not. As you can see with the different cases, the sons were pretty much the same. Because a lot of it has to go with how the sex chromosomes are passed on. A father can never pass on an affected X to his son. The son gets his X from his mom. And the reason for that being, dads, as we said, are XY, and the moms are XX. This means that the father, during meiosis, and when chromosomes are separated, he can either pass on a sperm with the X chromosome or a sperm with the Y chromosome. For the mom, it doesn't really matter. She's only going to pass on an X. So that means that either we're going to get an X from dad. We're always going to have an X from mom. So X and an X from dad means a daughter. X from mom. Y from dad means a son. It is the man, the male, who determines the sex of the offspring, which kind of puts a wrench in, was it King Henry VIII's idea, killing and beheading all his wives because they wouldn't give him sons. It was actually his own fault. He was the one passing on the second X. If he would have just passed on a Y. So yeah, because of that, since a father will never give his son the Y or an X, then a father can never pass on an X-linked trait to his son. So the son will get it from mom. So if she is completely normal, if she is normal vision, she will, or then none of her sons will be colorblind. If she is a carrier, her sons have a 50% chance of having colorblindness. If she herself is colorblind, then her sons have a 100% chance of being colorblind as well. The dad passes on the X to his daughter. So that means that if dad is colorblind, let's say he's colorblind, it's not a guarantee that his daughter will be colorblind as well. If the mom passes on a normal vision X, his daughter will be a carrier. However, if mom is a carrier or mom is colorblind, then that's how she can pass on, or the daughter can become colorblind. But in that case, both parents need the allele. In this case, sorry. Oh yeah, that was the daughters. I'm confusing myself. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. That was part was for the sons. So I apologize. So if mom is homozygous dominant, so normal vision, son will be 100% normal vision. All her sons will be. If she is a carrier, then that means that her son will have a 50% chance of being colorblind. The numbers are the same. I just didn't draw it right. I apologize. 50% chance of being normal. And if she is colorblind, she can only pass on the affected X. So 100% chance of her sons being colorblind. All right. So there's that. Whatever the son gets on the X from his mom, that is what he will show. But it depends on what the daughter gets from mom and dad. which is why we see it less commonly in females. Doesn't mean we don't see it, just means we see it less commonly. All right, so I hope that helps. If you have questions, hit me up in our Google Classroom or in class. So take care, you guys. Bye-bye.